My name is Clara Hayes. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a freelance graphic designer and illustrator. The smell of roasted turkey and cranberry sauce usually meant comfort, tradition, and the one day a year my father, Richard, might genuinely relax. Not this past Thanksgiving. This year, the familiar scent was just a backdrop to the acid rising in my throat. I stood by the bay window in my parents' living room, a half-eaten slice of pumpkin pie forgotten on a plate in my hand, watching the last of the autumn light fade. My cousin, Mark, was trying to make small talk about my latest illustration project, but the words barely registered. I could feel my father's eyes on me from across the room, a silent, burning disapproval that had been simmering all afternoon. Then, he cleared his throat, a sound that always signaled an impending pronouncement. "Clara," he boomed, his voice cutting through the gentle hum of conversation, "it's time you faced facts. You are a family disgrace, and I want you out of my house." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, like a dropped heirloom shattering on the polished hardwood floor. My mother, Eleanor, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My aunts and uncles froze, glasses halfway to their lips. My immediate reaction was a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but not surprise. Just a quiet, steel resolve. I knew, in that moment, that this was not just about me leaving his house that night. This was about severing a tie that had been strangling me for years, and he had just given me the strength to do it permanently. The holidays would never be the same, for any of us. To understand why his words, though brutal, didn't completely break me, you need to know a little about Richard Hayes. My father built his small real estate empire on a foundation of control and appearances. From the moment I was old enough to hold a crayon, he had a plan for me. Not just any plan, but his plan. I was to be a doctor, then a lawyer, then a high-powered executive. Each phase of my childhood brought a new, meticulously researched career path, complete with brochures and projected salary figures. My mother, a quiet woman who found solace in her garden, rarely challenged him. She'd offer me a soft, sympathetic glance, or slip me an extra cookie, but she never intervened. I, however, found my voice early, albeit quietly. While my father envisioned me negotiating mergers, I was drawing fantastical creatures in the margins of my textbooks. While he pushed me towards AP calculus, I was dreaming of vibrant colors and intricate patterns. My passion wasn't a phase, it was who I was. When I announced, at 18, that I was applying to art school, the silence at the dinner table was deafening. He didn't yell then. Instead, he employed a tactic I'd come to know well, the disappointed sigh, the mournful shake of the head, the casual mention of risky choices and financial stability at every family gathering. He called art a hobby, a distraction, something I'd grow out of. But I didn't. I worked 3 part-time jobs through art school, refusing to take a dime from him, determined to prove him wrong. After graduation, I started my freelance business, slowly building a portfolio and a client base. It was hard, grinding work, but it was mine. I loved the freedom, the challenge, the satisfaction of seeing my designs come to life. 2 years ago, I managed to save enough for a down payment on a small, slightly dilapidated studio space in a budding arts district. It was barely more than a garage with a skylight, but to me, it was everything. It was proof of my independence, my ability to make my own way. My father, of course, saw it differently. He saw it as a reckless investment, a financial black hole, a symbol of my continued defiance. That studio became a recurring point of contention. Every time I visited my parents, the conversation would inevitably turn to it. "Still wasting your money on that glorified shed, Clara?" he'd ask, his tone dripping with mock concern. "You know, I could get you a good deal on a commercial property. Something with potential." He meant his potential, his vision. He wanted me to sell my studio and invest in a new development he was spearheading, a high-rise condo project that he was convinced would make me financially secure. I knew it was his way of trying to reel me back into his orbit, to control my assets, to make me dependent on him. I politely but firmly refused every time, explaining that my studio was essential for my work, my independence. Each refusal chipped away at his patience, and I could feel the tension building, a silent pressure cooker threatening to explode. A few months before Thanksgiving, the pressure escalated. My father had a new project, a commercial space he was struggling to lease. He called me, not to ask, but to inform me that he had found a solution for my struggling business. He expected me to move my studio into his vacant property, rent-free for a year, with the unspoken understanding that I'd then become a paying tenant, tied to his property. He framed it as a generous offer, a way to help me. "It's time you stopped playing at being an artist, Clara," he'd said, his voice tight with paternal authority. "This is a chance to get serious, to have a proper address, a proper business." I explained, again, that my current studio was perfect for my needs, that the location was right for my clients, and that I valued my independence. He took my refusal as a personal affront. "You always think you know better, don't you?" he'd snapped, and hung up. That detail mattered later. The week before Thanksgiving, a cryptic email landed in my inbox. It was from a real estate agent, detailing an offer on my studio. A surprisingly low offer, but an offer nonetheless. The sender's name was unfamiliar, but the timing felt suspicious. I hadn't listed my studio for sale, nor had I expressed any interest in selling it. I replied, stating I wasn't selling, and thought little more of it, assuming it was a cold call. Then, 2 days later, I received a text message from my cousin, Mark. "Hey, heard you thinking of selling the studio? Dad mentioned it." My blood ran cold. My father had been actively trying to sell my property behind my back. He had clearly contacted a real estate agent, perhaps even fabricating my interest, to get me to move into his building. The audacity of it, the blatant disregard for my autonomy, was staggering. I called him, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. He didn't deny it. "I was just trying to help you see sense, Clara," he'd said, his tone dismissive. "That little shack isn't worth anything. This new development, that's where the future is." He truly believed he was acting in my best interest, or rather, in his best interest, which he equated with mine. I spent the next few days in a quiet fury. I researched the real estate agent who had contacted me and found that they were indeed connected to my father's network. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a deliberate attempt to manipulate me. I even found a publicly available listing for my studio, complete with a few grainy photos I'd never taken, implying it was for sale by owner and listing my cell number. It was a violation, a betrayal of trust so profound it left me reeling. I called the agent and demanded they remove the listing immediately, threatening legal action for misrepresentation and invasion of privacy. They complied, apologetic and clearly embarrassed, confirming they had been contacted by Mr. Hayes, who had assured them I was interested in selling. When Thanksgiving Day arrived, the atmosphere was already thick with unspoken tension. I arrived early, hoping to diffuse some of it, to at least make it through the day without a major incident. My mother greeted me with a strained hug, her eyes darting nervously towards the dining room where my father was already holding court. The crystal glasses, a set my grandmother had cherished, were already laid out on the table, catching the light. Dad always insisted on using them for special occasions, a symbol of our family's enduring legacy and sophistication. He had polished them himself that morning, I knew, meticulously ensuring every facet gleamed. As I saw them, I felt a pang of resentment. They represented the pristine image he demanded, an image I was apparently failing to uphold. Dinner was a minefield of pointed questions and thinly veiled criticisms. My father kept bringing up responsible investments and secure futures, always looking pointedly at me. My cousin Mark, bless his heart, tried to steer the conversation towards sports, then current events, but my father was relentless. He asked about my clients, then scoffed at the mention of a local bakery, implying it wasn't a serious enough client. He then launched into a monologue about the importance of family unity and supporting each other's ventures, clearly referring to his new development. I kept my answers short, my gaze fixed on my plate, trying to remain calm. I knew what he was building towards. It was after the pie, as coffee was being served, that he finally struck. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, and fixed me with a stare that felt like a physical weight. "Clara," he began, his voice low but carrying, "we need to talk about your choices. Your life choices. This studio of yours, this artistic career, it's not working. It's an embarrassment. I've tried to help you, to guide you, but you refuse to listen. You're making a spectacle of yourself, and frankly, you are a family disgrace. I've had enough. I want you out of my house." The words hit like a punch to the gut, but also, strangely, like a release. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the clatter of a fork dropped by my Aunt Susan. My mother looked utterly devastated, tears welling in her eyes. My uncles shifted uncomfortably. My father, seemed to swell with self-righteousness, his chest puffed out. He had finally said it, out loud, in front of everyone. He had drawn a line, and I was on the wrong side of it. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly, the scraping sound echoing in the quiet room. My hands were trembling slightly, but my voice was steady. "You're right, Dad," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "My choices are mine. And I'm proud of them. What's truly disgraceful is trying to sell your daughter's property behind her back, trying to control her life because it doesn't fit your narrow definition of success." I watched his face contort in shock and fury. He hadn't expected me to fight back, not like this, not in front of the whole family. "You tried to put my studio on the market, Dad," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "You contacted a real estate agent, listed my property without my consent, and then tried to coerce me into leasing your vacant space. That's not help, that's manipulation. And it's a betrayal." The room erupted in murmurs. My Uncle David, usually silent, looked genuinely appalled. My mother let out a small sob. My father, his face now a mottled red, slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. "How dare you accuse me of such a thing? You're lying. You're making things up," he roared, but his eyes betrayed him. He knew I had caught him. "I have the email from the agent, Dad," I said calmly, pulling out my phone and holding it up. "And the screenshot of the listing. You can deny it all you want, but the evidence speaks for itself." The color drained from his face. He looked around the table, his gaze darting from one shocked family member to another, his usual authority crumbling. "Get out," he shrieked, pointing towards the door, his voice cracking. "Get out of my house right now. You've ruined everything." I didn't need to be told twice. I walked to the coat rack, retrieved my jacket, and turned back to face the stunned faces. "Happy Thanksgiving, everyone," I said, my voice quiet but firm, then walked out the door, leaving the smell of burnt pride and ruined turkey behind me. The cold night air felt invigorating, a stark contrast to the suffocating warmth of the house. I got into my car and drove straight to my studio, the one he called a shack. It felt like a sanctuary. The aftermath was exactly as he'd predicted, the party was indeed ruined. My mother called me later that night, crying, apologizing for his behavior, but also asking me to just apologize to him. I told her I couldn't. I had nothing to apologize for. My Uncle David called too, offering his support, telling me he was proud of me for standing up for myself. He even offered to connect me with a lawyer if I wanted to pursue action against my father for the unauthorized listing. I declined, for now. The biggest consequence was the silence from my father. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't try to smooth things over. He simply cut me off. The family holidays became awkward affairs, with my absence a palpable presence. My mother would visit me at my studio, bringing me plates of food, her eyes always a little sad. A few weeks later, an unexpected email arrived. It was from the owner of the local bakery, my client, who had been at the Thanksgiving dinner. She told me she had heard what my father said, and she wanted to commission a large mural for her shop, a vibrant, detailed piece that would showcase my style. She said she admired my courage and wanted to support real artists. It was a significant commission, enough to secure my financial footing for the next year and allow me to make some much-needed renovations to my glorified shed. I never saw those crystal glasses again at a family gathering. My mother started using a more casual, everyday set. I heard through Mark that my father had packed them away, perhaps because they now represented a broken ideal, a shattered image of the perfect family he had tried so hard to maintain. I often think about the faded family photograph on his mantelpiece, the one of him and my mother from their wedding day, young and full of hopeful promises. It used to symbolize the past I was expected to uphold. Now, it just reminds me that some promises are better broken, and some futures are better built on your own terms.